Alright gang, watching the video at home. Our story till now, we're creating a program that's going to ask the user for a file name, and it's going to generate a 100-line file that's composed of 3 numbers per line. So if you happen to be typing this in, feel free to pause it. What do? We open the file. We have a for loop so that we can do it 100 times. We create our 3 numbers and we print it out. So what's the last thing I need to do to my print statement to get it saved to the file? I got to add the file parameter. File equals fout. Why fout? Well, that's just what I call my variable. Remember, variable names are meaningless except to the human. The computer doesn't care if I call it fout or George, right? As long as I use George here as well. How would I do this if I did what the book shows? Don't type this because I'm going to erase it. They would want to use fout.write. Like I said, please don't type this. And then they would want to print out the string version of x1 plus a space. Or we could do the same thing here. But anyways, at the end of it, we would have to print out a blank line because write does not go to the next line. So anyways, we're not going to do that. Just remember that write, if you're going to do that, you have to convert all your data to a string. We could have just copied and pasted that there. That would have done the job just as well. But then add the new line at the end. That would have done the same thing. But I like using print because we already know how to use print. This business about dot format doesn't require it to be tucked inside a print. You could just build a string that look like that. And again, don't type this. S is equal to that. That would work just as well. It would format our string full of all that data and stick it in a string S. And in that case, our print statement would come easy. You know, maybe we ought to do that. No, I want it to look like it always does. But if I had done that, then I would replace all that with S. All right, time to undo some stuff. All right, that's it. So we're going to end for. What if we wanted to add the extension .txt if they had not provided an extension? We could search the string to see if it's got a period in it, right? Because if it's got a period, it's got an extension. If it doesn't have a period, then it doesn't have an extension, and we could concatenate, we could append .txt to it. Where would we do that? We would do that right after we asked for it. How do you check to see if something's in a string? You search the string. You could do a search and find out if its position is in there or not, or you could just use the IN keyword, which checks to see if something is in a string. So after we check it, after we get it, add .txt extension if fn doesn't have one. One meaning an extension. So if there's a period, okay, we're going to actually use the word not. If there's not, quote, period, end quote, in the file name, colon, we'd tack on .txt at the end of it. So fn plus equals, quote, .txt. fn plus equals, no space between those two, quote, .txt, end quote. And why are we adding .txt? Just so we could double click on it and it comes up, inside Notepad. Or if we open it in Excel, Excel will recognize that it's a text file. All right. The last thing we could do is pop it open inside Notepad, but meh, we can just go to our directory and see if that works. So I'm going to save it. Looks like I've accidentally, no. I think somebody else has been saving stuff in here. Oh yeah, we already figured out somebody else had. I forgot. All right. You know what? I'm going to delete those things just right on the spot. No, I'm not. It's not letting me select 3 of them. Okay, so lecture O py, and let's run it, see if it works. And you know what? Anytime you write to a file, you ought to print a message saying that the file was created, because otherwise when I run it, I'm going to get absolutely no output because all the output is going to a file. So I'm going to tack on print parentheses quote fn comma quote written or saved or something like that, right? Just to tell them, or created, right? That's a good word. We created that file. All right, I'll bring the code back up in a minute, but file name, I don't know, lecture o.txt. Please don't save it as .py or else you'll erase your file. Lecture 0.txt created. So if I want to look at it, I can do File, Open, go to my code directory, whoops, I don't see my text file. I need to change the file type, right, down here, from Python files to TXT files. And there we go. Ooh, hoo, hoo. I botched it completely. Wonder why.
I botched it completely.
Why don't we copy and paste this line and print it to the screen as well? I'm not getting why. Oh, what did I forget? I said after you open a file, you need to close the file. So this needs to be fout.close, above or below this print statement. fout.close, parentheses in parentheses. Try it again. Open the file. Set it for TXT files. Open it up. All right. So now we have a whole bunch of data. I could have y'all import it into Excel. Nathan did a cool graph last time. Not gonna do that, but we're gonna write something that opens it for reading and processes it. When you read it in, you get it line by line. And so we're going to have to split it based on the spaces. And we're going to do the usual bit of stripping it so that it won't have any nulls at the end, or backslash ends. That's just good programming practice. And we're also going to check to make sure that there are no blank lines. We don't want to process it if somebody's gone in and added a blank line. And sometimes I show students how to handle it if there's a comment in it, right? All you have to do is check the first character and ignore it if it's got a hash in the first line. But first I'm going to close all that. All right. If you're typing it in and you want it to work and you're getting syntax errors so it's not working, anybody stuck? All right. Okay. So what are we going to do next? Let's put a little guideline. We're going to open the file for reading. We're going to use a for loop to read in each line. We're going to check. Well, let's strip it. Use strip to remove white space from the beginning and end. Because if we print it out, it would print out every other line because there's going to be a backslash n. Then check for empty strings, right? Because if you strip it, it's possible that there's nothing left. It was just a blank line. And check for quote in the first position of the string. And if it doesn't have empty strings and it doesn't have that, then we're going to use split to create an array. Getting there, this has got a lot of little subtasks. We need to convert the array to an array of numbers. So we could use string comprehension for that, or array comprehension. Use array comprehension to convert array to floats because it comes in as strings. Add those numbers and then print the total. And this is all going to be inside the for loop, right? So if we wanted to, you don't have to go back and do it. I'm just showing you our plan. That looks like a lot, but fortunately, this is almost a one-for-one, right? So our code really should not be a lot more than this. If we find an empty string, we're just going to use continue to skip it. What does continue do? It skips the rest of the for loop, jumps back up to the top. Just like break exits the for loop, continue kind of breaks it, but it jumps back to the top rather than the bottom. All right, got to open the file for reading. Opening the file for reading is the exact same as opening it for writing, except you put a R inside the quotes. And I'm going to call it FN for input file. So FN is equal to open. I don't like the fact that my file names are this close together, but I'm not going to fix it. FIN is equal to open FN with no I, comma, quote, read, or R, excuse me, end quote, parentheses. Then we're going to use a for loop to read it in. For data in FIN. At this point we have string data. We're going to strip it. Data equals data.strip, parentheses in parentheses. Why can't you just call data.strip? Because strings are so-called immutable. There's no function that Python gives you that'll actually change the string. It'll return a copy of it, modified by how you ask for it. And so it returns a copy that we then have to store into either another variable or back into itself. Now after we've checked it, we have done this. So far we've done these three statements. Check for empty strings. How do we do that? We just check the length of it. If len parentheses data in parentheses equals 0 colon, that means there's no data in it, and so we're going to continue.
Length.
Then we need to check to see if there's a hash in it in the first position. So if, and how do we get the first position of a string? It's just like the first position of a list. We're going to do this, data subscript 0. And we don't need to use slicing to get more than one character. We're just checking for the first character. Equals, quote, pound sign, end quote, colon, continue. Now since these are two actions that do the same thing, we could use an OR to check them both. What would I do? I would just modify this line right here. And before the colon, I would tack on the words OR and then have the rest of this. I'm okay with it being two separate statements, but I'm going to show you what I would do and then undo it, right? I would take that stuff here and I would say OR and then paste that, right? And then of course this would get deleted. If you like the way that looks, you can do that. You know what? I'm going to leave it like that. Let me walk through that again. So I'm going to cut out the if condition here. I'm sorry. Let me get this out of here. Right? There we go. and I'm going to put it in front of the colon, but I have to have the word or here, like that. And we ought to kind of put some kind of comment explaining what we're doing here, which is ignore blank lines or empty lines, right? Okay, I'm just calling them blank lines, or lines that begin with that. That's what we're doing there. We have handled step from here. Use split to create the array. Alrighty. And I'm doing something that could be considered bad programming practice. Oh, why not? Nums equals, okay, I'm going to correct it and not do the bad programming practice. Nums is equal to data dot split, parentheses, quote, space, end quote. Split based on spaces. There definitely is a space between those quotes. Let's just print nums out at this point. Run it. Better close the file after our for loop. Fin.close. Just because there's no reason to type 2 pages of code before testing it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just test. I actually should have tested it around here, but let's test it after the array.
I would recommend changing the lines in the last code to 10.
Oh yeah? Okay. So data comma nums. I'm going to change that so that we see the string followed by the array. Because the string is what we just read in. The array is what we created with dot split. I'm not spotting what's wrong there. End of file. Oh, yeah. I need an end quote before the period. There we go.
Oh, man.
All right. File name equals, I don't know, T. All right. And we can look to see what it printed as its output. Here's the string, and here's the array created from it, split by spaces. Or we could have split it by commas, right? In which case we just change our, our split statement. That's our delimiter. The delimiter is the thing that separates the data. Delimiter is a space. If we were going to open it up in Excel, we'd have to specify that the delimiter are spaces so that it would know how to arrange the columns. Okay, we're almost done. I'm going to take out this print statement. It's not an array of numbers yet. Did somebody not show me a different way of doing this without list comprehension? I don't recall. What is list comprehension? It's just when you put a for loop inside of square braces to recreate the array or to store it in a new one. So I need my square braces in it. I'm trying to convert each piece of data to a number. So double X in parentheses, double parentheses X in parentheses for X in nums. See what we're doing? We're just coming through here, and this steps through nums, and every value in it gets converted to a double and stored back over here. Lastly, we can get the sum of that array. Total equals sum parentheses nums in parentheses. And then what are we going to do? Are we just going to print out the sum, or are we going to print out the data and the sum? I say we print out the data and the sum. So print, parentheses, quote, data equals, end quote, comma, data, comma, quote, space, maybe 2 spaces to make it even easier to read. Sum equals, this would look a lot prettier if we use string formatting. Sum is equal to, end quote, comma, sum. And why did I make that comment about string formatting? The data is not going to be nice and neat in columns. If I wanted it nice and neat in columns, I'd have to use formatting, right? I'd have to use dot format, or I'd have to use the quote percent symbols. I think we're good though.
Should that be total instead of sum?
It should be. Thank you. Total, right there. If I was going to use the word sum, I'd better actually recalculate sum. Right, I could have put sums parentheses, sum parentheses nums there. So my file name is t.txt. Double is not defined. Yeah, you're right. Wrong language. What should I put there to convert it to a floating point number? Float. What's the word double mean in some languages like C++ and Java? There's a more precise data type than float called double. It's a double wide float. But in this language, floats already are doubles, so they don't need the word double there. All right, let's run it, and then I'll wander around trying to help everybody. It created a file called txt. There's all of our data, and their sums. Alrighty, so we did it. You know how to create a file and store some data in it, just with print statements or .write statements. I'll be right there. And you know how to open a file and get the data out. Now you don't have to call .split if there's only one number per line. It wouldn't break it. It might be the fastest way to convert it to a number. On the other hand, you know how to read. You know how to convert strings to floats. We're only using .split because there's more than one number per line. And .split will work on a line of any length. Right? If I went in and modified it to write 7 numbers out to it, this code doesn't even have to change. Doesn't matter if there's 1 number per line or 100 numbers per line. All right, time to pause and check. Let's add these as comments. .read reads the entire file into a string. Not a good idea if the file is, 100 kilobytes or 1,000,000 kilobytes long. .read line, I believe that's it. Let me, I never use it, so let me make absolutely sure I'm not lying to you. Yeah, read line reads 1 line at a time into a string, or just use a for loop like we did. Use a for loop to read 1 line at a time. Data comes in with a new line at the end, so use strip to fix that. Always close your file when you're done, or else, just like your professor, you'll try to open the file and you may not see anything.
Or you can make too many numbers and it's taking a while, like I did.
Yeah, if you change that from 100 to 1,000,000, it's going to take a while.
I actually think I may have turned to more than 1,000,000.
Oh, yeah. As a reminder, S.0 gets the first character. S0:2 gets the first 2 characters. First 2 characters of the string, which are positions 0 and 1. S2 colon, and then leave off the last parameter, gets from index 2 all the way to the end. So if you leave off the number after the colon, it goes all the way to the end. If you leave off the number before the colon, it just starts at 0. I don't see the advantage of doing that. And here's something that I don't recall if it mentioned, or maybe it waits until we talk about lists. If you do this, S square bracket colon in bracket, it gets the entire string, but making a copy of it. Now for strings, you don't need to do that really. But when you do lists, that's a good idea sometimes. Why? Because sometimes you want to make a copy of your list so that you can modify the copy but still preserve your data. And I was hemming and hawing about what to call my variable right here. It's going to be a long day. Excuse me. Trust me, I'm not sick. Data equals data.split. That's what I was going to type. Data equals data.split. Don't make that change because I'm going to immediately undo it. So data equals data.split. Why did I not want to do that? Because I'm changing my original data. I'm converting it to an array. I no longer have access to my data. I wouldn't have been able to print it out here. I would have, but it would have come out looking like an array. Right. So you just have to decide whether it's safe to erase your original data or not. It might have looked nice and clean if I had used data all the way out rather than introduce this new nums variable. Now I did not add a comment for what .split was going to do because I filled it with this delimiter comment. So I guess I'll add a comment above it. Use .split to convert string to a list. And I keep calling it an array. That's technically not correct. Python doesn't support arrays. It supports lists. What's an array? It's a fixed list. It's fixed in length. It can't grow or shrink, whereas lists can grow or shrink. There's more to it than that, but that's enough for now. So when I say array, just realize that Python can treat things as arrays, but really they're lists. And the difference is that a list can grow or shrink. I could add data to my list if I wanted to. You know, I could make 4 items in it, 5 items, 6 items into it. I could read all the data into one mega list just by adding each 3 item that we create into it. All right. Here, a little bit more typing. Let's go up, open chapter 5. Oops.
I'm literally checking the demo. Oh man, that takes a while.
Does that make sense? I don't stop often enough and ask if there are questions. Always interrupt me, right? If you have questions. I may not always stop and ask questions. All right, lists and dictionaries. Well, what do you know? We were just talking about lists. We've already seen lists a couple of times. I'm going to give you a sneak preview of what lists are just before we get to it in the PowerPoint. Say we did this. Phone equals, if you're a classic rock fan, you're familiar with the sequence of numbers, 8, 6, 7, 5, 3, 0, 9. So phone is equal to square 8, 6, 7, 5, 3, 0, 9. And we know that in America, these first 3 digits are the local prefix, and the last 4, are the number. We don't think of it like that anymore. Like in the olden days, your phone number may have just been 4 digits long, and then you may have just had a prefix of 7, but that's before we had 8 zillion people with phone numbers. Now let's split it. Let's get the first 3 and put it into prefix, and I'm not sure what I'm going to call the rest of it. I just have to come up with it. Prefix is equal to the phone starting at the first position and then going out to 3. Excuse me, 3. The fastest way to think about it is not what it technically does, which go out up to but not including 3, which would be 0, 1, and 2. Instead, just take the length of it and add it to the first position, right? So if I wanted the last 4 digits, which I do, I can just start at this prefix and then add 4 to it. Not prefix, index. Okay. I'm going to call the rest of it number because I can't think of a good term for it. So the rest of it is phone number starting at what position is at 5, counting over from 0. 0, 1, 2, 3. And then if I want to get 4 digits, 3 plus 4 is 7. Now honestly, probably what I would want to do is to just go to the end of the string, right? Excuse me, end of list, which I would accomplish like that. And then we can print those 2 things out, right? Print the prefix, comma, number. What if it had an area code? How could we check to see if it had an area code? We just check to see if it was 10 digits long. What if they tacked on a 1 in front of it, like some people sometimes do? We might need to remove the 1. We could make this example more complicated, but I think I'm just doing this to remind you that accessing pieces of a list is as easy as accessing elements in the array. So file name is equal to, oh great, it's going to do this every single time. And there's our phone number broken up by its prefix and the rest of it. And Nathan, you better change it so that it's not 1 million anymore. It's taking your program a long time to run. We could have copied and we could have put all this up at the beginning of it, right?
Go ahead and kill it.
If we wanted to.
I better kill this one or else I'm going to have to be able
Yeah.
to code it anyway. Because it's 10 trillion.
Oh, good grief. Alrighty, so that's how to use a list. What if you wanted the sum of the list? I don't know why you'd add up the digits of a phone number. Maybe you're into numerology. Right, so total is equal to sum, parentheses, phone. Right, add up all the digits. Let's just add up the digits of the prefix. And then total 2 is equal to the sum of the last 4. Right? So that's the sum of the second half. What if you wanted to see if there are any 2s in the list? If space 2 space in space phone colon then print parentheses quote we found a 2 end quote in parentheses comma yay there like that. There is no 2 in that phone number, so we're not going to see that message. We probably should have checked to make sure that that phone wasn't 7 digits long. If it's not 7 digits wrong, it's not a valid phone number, right? It should be either 7, 10, or 11. And if it's not 7, then these estimates here are incorrect, right? Because if it's 10 long, then the first 3 are not a prefix, they're the area code. So, if the length of the phone number is greater than 7, print parentheses, quote, that wasn't a valid phone number, end quote, in parentheses. What if they typed in 1 at the beginning? If that's not a valid phone number, no phone numbers in the United States begin with 1. That's just a signal that it's a long distance number. So if phone subscript 0 in subscript equals 1, then it's a problem. Print I guess instead of just saying that wasn't a valid phone number, we should have said a valid local phone number, right? Because it's more than 7 digits long. And I did not mean to go down there. Get back here. Don't include the 1, end quote, in parentheses. Don't include the 1 or an area code. And I guess instead of saying that wasn't a valid phone number, we could yell at them to not include the area code. We could assume that that's what they did wrong. But whatever. These are the checks that are important. I just want you to see how to check the length of the list and to check for a specific value, how to search it. Now you could also find the index position of it. Like if we were curious about where the 0 was and we wanted to change that 0 to a 2, we could search the entire list and change the 0 to a 2. And offhand, I don't remember the specific keyword for that, so I'm going to go to the PowerPoint in a minute after I make sure it runs. Yeah, file name T. All right. And it didn't print any of that stuff. Why? Because that was all kind of error handling or whatever. What if I add on one more digit to it, right? So I'm going to come up here and add another 9 to it, just to trigger some of these messages. At least one of them. It wasn't a valid phone number because 5 digits there. I guess somebody thought that they could include the extension or something there. Let's start it off with the 1. So I'm adding a 1 to my phone number. Wasn't a valid local phone number. Don't include the 1 or an area code. All right, so that stuff all seems to be working. I think I'll remove that 1 comma. I think I'll leave the 9 though, just to trigger at least one of our messages. What if you wanted to iterate through the list? Use a for loop just like you would if you were stepping through a string. For X, and I'm not going to type in range anymore because I'm not making a range, I'm not making a sequence of numbers. Instead, I'm going through the phone. So for X in phone, it's going to print out 8675309. So let's do that, print X. Or how about saying print, quote, digit equals, end quote, comma X. Digit. And there it goes, 8675309. If we were checking for a 2, we could just check to see what X was at this time, right? But that's not the most efficient way to do it. That searches the entire list for a 2, and if we wanted to find the position of a 2 so we could remove it or something like that, we could do so. The PowerPoint knows all. We will see how to do that. Anybody need assistance? Good deal. Wrong one.
I'm going to be
Didn't I download it? Guess I didn't. If you ever remember dial-up modems, it's a miraculous world we live in anymore where you can download megabytes in a second.
If this were dial-up internet, we'd be like,
Yep. So a list, what is a list? It allows a user, the programmer, to manipulate a sequence of data values. An important thing to remember is that it's an ordered sequence because there's something called a set, which is an unordered. And if you're a math fan, you know what a set is. You can have two sets of numbers and you can intersect them to get which numbers were in both of them, that kind of stuff. We're not going to do too much with sets. We may not do with anything other than just demonstrate that you can make them. And then a dictionary organizes data values by association with other data values. Yeah, let's create a dictionary. Let's get a sneak preview of that as well. So, we're going to create a dictionary. I can't think of a better name for it, so I'm just going to call it dict. Nope, can't use that word because it's purple. How about
DI?
Spanish to English. All right. Equals dict parentheses in parentheses. Or it lets you do a shortcut and just use it curly braces. But I know from experience that people start using parentheses when I do that, and that defines a set. So why not make it like this? This makes an empty dictionary. Now if we were to change the first digit in Jenny's phone number, because that's the name of the song, then you would do it like this. Phone subscript 0 in subscript is equal to 2. That changes the first element. To use a dictionary, you do the same thing, except you can put a word in there or a key. I mean, any value. Because a dictionary is a structure that matches keys to values rather than just indexes to values. What do I mean by that? Okay, now I don't know my Spanish to English really, so I'm kind of bluffing here. Let's go with S2E subscript. And what's Spanish for red? Is it rojo?
Yes.
Okay, end quote, comma, quote, or wait. Quote, square brace equals quote, red. End quote, like that. All right, forgive me so I don't have to keep asking. Spanish colors. All right, there's a whole bunch of them there. Right, now I can pretend I'm smart. Amarillo. Why the city is named yellow? Not sure. So let's do that. S2E square quote Amarillo. Did I misspell that? No, I actually got it. End quote in square is equal to quote yellow.
Texas would name their city yellow.
End quote in parentheses. And blue is azul. So let's add one more. S2E square quote azul in quote in square equals quote, and I've made a mistake, you're correct. Blue end quote. What's my mistake, gang? It's on this line, the yellow line.
The bracket is.
Yeah, I put the bracket in the wrong place, and I don't know why I did that. Spaced out. The brace goes after the quote, before the equal sign, not at the end of the line. Right? Like that. Just to see what our data structure looks like, let's print our phone number. So print parentheses phone, but then print our Spanish to English dictionary, S2E, in parentheses. file name T, go lickety split. Okay, here's my phone number list.
Wait, what?
2675309, and if we were going to access elements of it, you do it with the square braces, and you put in an index number, which in fact we did, right? When we changed the first element to a 2, we used index 0, and that's why that's now a 2. When we printed out the dictionary, we see that these are pairs of values. Rose connected to red, Amarillo is connected to yellow, Azul is connected to blue. So if we wanted to, S2E subscript, parentheses, Azul, end quote. I said parentheses, that's square brace, sorry, my mistake. Right, there we go. That's how we got that value out, blue. This is a pretty powerful device, actually. Why? Because you may not know in what order you want to store your data. You just may want to assign them to keys, right? You're not supposed to use social security numbers for, for identification purposes anymore. That's why your driver's license doesn't have your social security number. But you could have used a driver's license for a social security number, for your key, right? And then you could look up in the structure somebody who had that social security number. Or we could just associate, like, names and ages, or names and addresses. Do one or two examples of that. So I'm going to call this my A book, short for address book, equals DICT, parentheses in parentheses, and I have a hunch that I should have stopped and asked for corrections. And so A book subscript, quote, Joe Bob, end quote, end brace, equals, he lives at 123 South Main, end quote. An A book subscript, quote, Sue Bob, his sister, end quote, in subscript, equals, she lives across town at 789 West North Street. Now the syntax of a for loop, that'll step through this, and don't type this because this is not quite correct, is for key in dictionary, right? And it pulls out a list of keys. Well, heck, we could do that. We could leave that. And then print the key. And we will just see the names because these are the keys. Just like those are the lookup words in a dictionary. We can look up people by their names. Right? We're seeing only the names. That's okay. We only got the keys. How do you get the values? Just like you do in a list. So before we print the key, let's get the value out. Value equals A book subscript key. Get the value for that specific key. And there's more than one way to do this. I think if you did for key comma value in A book, it would get you both at the same time. But I think this is of critical importance here. How to pull the value out of an address, out of a dictionary based on its key. And so then let's print the key. And before the close parentheses, comma, quote, address is, end quote, comma, value.
Now, let's print it.
Just like that, right? Those are their addresses. Pause and walkabout. Some more. Let's add another number to our phone list. And I never can remember if it's phone.add or append. We will find out really fast. I'm going to append the number 987 totally invalid data, right? In parentheses, and then I'm going to print the phone number back out, just so I see that 987 show up in it. And when I say I don't quite remember, it's because, not that I'm stupid, although I could be, but it's because different languages call it different things. There we go. 987 got added, got appended to our list. How do you add to a dictionary? You add to a dictionary just by not using add, but doing another one of these, another subscript, another key value pair. What if Sue Bob is moved? Sue Bob moves back in with her brother Joe Bob. A book, and this will be the last thing we do before we bail. A book subscript, quote, Sue Bob, end quote, comma, quote, 123 S main, end quote. Oh, I'm doing it again. Excuse me. Sue Bob, quote, square brace, close square brace, equals 123 South Main, end quote.
Bob's kind of a lame last name if you ask me, right?
Yeah, that's all right. It's easy to type. All right. And so when I printed it, I didn't print it out, but that's how you do it. That replaces the value. The keys have to be unique. And when I say have to be unique, you don't have a choice about whether they're unique or not. The keys are unique. In this dictionary, you can only have one definition per word, right? Okay. So let's stop here and make the Dropbox, stuff like that.